The surveyor's measuring tape stretched across the manicured lawn like a taut wire of truth, and Karen's face went white as snow. She'd built her entire vendetta on a lie, 3 inches of property line that never belonged to her. Now, as police sirens wailed in the distance, she realized her desperate call for my arrest had just exposed the one secret that would destroy everything she'd worked to protect. The fence wasn't the real crime. What lay buried beneath it was. The shouting started at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, piercing through the suburban calm like a fire alarm. David Chen had been watering his tomato plants when Karen Whitmore came storming across the driveway that separated their properties, her silk robe billowing behind her like a battle flag. "You move that fence right now," she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. "You're stealing my land. You criminal." David lowered his watering can slowly, watching his 60-year-old neighbor advance on him with the fury of someone who'd been planning this confrontation for weeks. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled, mascara smudged beneath her eyes as if she'd been crying or hadn't slept. "Good morning to you too, Karen," David said evenly. "What fence are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me." She thrust a manicured finger toward the 6-foot cedar fence that ran along the property line between their backyards. "That monstrosity you put up last month. It's 3 inches onto MY property, and I want it moved today." David set down the watering can and walked closer to the fence, genuinely puzzled. He'd hired Morrison Fencing, the most reputable company in Millbrook Heights, and they'd used the original survey stakes from when he'd bought the house 2 years ago. The fence sat exactly where it was supposed to. "Karen, I used a licensed surveyor before the installation. The fence is on my property line. Your surveyor is a fraud." Her voice pitched higher, drawing the attention of Mrs. Patterson, who was retrieving her morning paper 3 houses down. "I've lived here for 15 years, and I know exactly where my property ends. You've stolen 3 inches of MY land." 3 inches. David almost laughed at the absurdity, but something in Karen's eyes stopped him. This wasn't about 3 inches of grass. This was about something deeper, more desperate. "Look," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "if you really think there's an issue, why don't we hire an independent surveyor? We can split the cost and—" "No." The word came out like a gunshot. "I'm not paying for your mistake. You move that fence, or I'm calling the police. This is theft, pure and simple." David felt his patience wearing thin. He'd dealt with difficult neighbors before, but Karen had been escalating her complaints for months. First, it was his late-night lawn mowing at 7 p.m. Then his excessive Christmas lights, 4 modest strings. Now this. "Karen, I'm not moving anything until we get this properly surveyed. If I'm wrong, I'll pay to move the fence myself." "You are wrong." She was shouting now, her face flushed red. "And I'm done being neighborly about it. Consider this your final warning." She spun on her heel and marched back toward her house, muttering something under her breath that sounded distinctly like "people like you." David stood there for a moment, watching her slam her front door hard enough to rattle the windows. "People like you." He'd heard that phrase before, usually from people who thought his Korean heritage made him somehow less American, less entitled to the American dream of homeownership and suburban peace. But Karen had seemed different when he'd moved in. She'd brought over cookies, store-bought, but still a gesture. They'd chatted over the fence about gardening and weather. What had changed? His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Maya, early meeting cancelled. Home by 10. How are the tomatoes?" He snapped a photo of his thriving plants and sent it back, deciding not to mention the morning's drama. Maya was already stressed about her promotion review at the law firm. She didn't need to worry about unhinged neighbors too. By 9 a.m., David was in his home office, trying to focus on quarterly reports for his software consulting business. But every few minutes, he found himself glancing out the window toward Karen's house. Her curtains were drawn tight, unusual for someone who typically had them open by dawn to catch the morning light on her prized rose garden. The police arrived at 10:23 a.m. David heard the sirens first, then saw the black and white cruiser pull up to the curb. 2 officers got out, one tall and thin, the other shorter with graying hair. The older officer checked his notepad before approaching David's front door. The doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession. "Mr. Chen." The older officer held up his badge. "I'm Officer Rodriguez, This is Officer Hayes. We received a complaint about property theft and vandalism. Mind if we come in? David's mouth went dry. Property theft. Your neighbor, Mrs. Whitmore, filed a formal complaint. She claims you've illegally built a fence on her property and are refusing to remove it. That's... David shook his head. Still processing. That's not what happened at all. Mind if we take a look at this fence? David led them through his house to the backyard, his mind racing. A formal complaint? Over 3 disputed inches? This was insane. The officers examined the fence line while David explained about the surveyor, the proper permits, the professional installation. Officer Rodriguez took notes while Officer Hayes measured the distance between the fence and various landmarks. Mrs. Whitmore showed us her property deed, Rodriguez said. She's claiming this fence extends past the boundary described in your property records. Then let's look at my records too, David said, pulling out his phone. I have all the documentation. Right here. As he scrolled through his files, Karen's back door opened. She emerged wearing a black dress and heels, as if she'd dressed for court. In her hands was a manila folder thick with papers. Officers, she called out, her voice honey-sweet now. Thank you so much for coming. This has been such a terrible ordeal. She glided over with practiced grace, the picture of a distressed homeowner seeking justice. But David noticed her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the folder. Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Hayes nodded. We are just reviewing the situation with Mr. Chen. Of course. I have everything documented right here. She opened the folder, revealing property deeds, photographs, and what looked like hand-drawn diagrams. As you can see, this fence clearly encroaches on my property. 3 inches might not seem like much to some people, but it's 3 inches. She shot David a look that could have frozen fire. Officer Rodriguez took the papers and compared them to David's digital documents. The silence stretched uncomfortably as he flipped between pages, occasionally glancing up at the fence line. He said finally. I'm going to need to ask you something. Are you certain about these property boundaries? Karen's confident smile flickered. Of course I'm certain. I've lived here for 15 years. Because according to Mr. Chen's survey, which was conducted by a licensed professional last month, this fence is positioned correctly on his property. In fact, he paused, double-checking his measurements. It appears to be slightly inside his property line, not over it. That's impossible, Karen said, but her voice had lost its earlier conviction. Mrs. Whitmore, making a false police report is a serious matter. Are you absolutely sure about your claims? David watched Karen's face cycle through emotions, confusion, anger, fear, and finally something that looked like panic. There must be some mistake, she stammered. My measurements were. I've always known where the line was. Officer Hayes stepped forward. I think there might be a misunderstanding here. Property disputes happen, but filing false reports doesn't help anyone. We are going to recommend that both parties hire an independent surveyor to settle this properly. But he's stealing. Rodriguez's voice was firm now. From what we can see here, Mr. Chen has followed all proper procedures. His fence appears to be legally positioned. If you continue to harass your neighbor over this matter without proper evidence, you could face charges for making false reports and harassment. Karen's face went ashen. Harassment? I'm the victim here. Mrs. Whitmore, we are going to need you to step back and let this matter be resolved through proper channels. No more complaints unless you have new evidence from a licensed surveyor. David felt a mixture of relief and amazement. Karen had been so certain, so aggressive in her accusations. Now she stood there looking lost and slightly ridiculous in her formal dress and scuffed heels. Officers, David said, I'm happy to hire an independent surveyor if it will resolve this. I just want to be a good neighbor. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's the right approach, Mr. Chen. As the officers walked back toward their car, Karen lingered by the fence. David expected another outburst, more accusations. Instead, she seemed to deflate, her shoulders sagging. Karen, he said gently, are you okay? This seems like more than just a property line issue. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed suddenly fragile, vulnerable. For a moment, he thought she might actually open up, might explain what was really driving this bizarre behavior. Instead, she straightened up, rebuilding her wall of indignation. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You might have fooled them. But I know what I know." She walked back to her house, but instead of slamming the door, she closed it softly. Somehow, that was more UN. Maya Chen arrived home to find her husband standing in their kitchen, staring out the window with the intensity of someone watching a crime scene unfold. "David." She set her briefcase down and followed his gaze. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." He turned to face her, and Maya was startled by the tension in his features. In 3 years of marriage, she'd rarely seen him this unsettled. "Karen called the police on me this morning." "What?" Maya's legal instincts kicked in immediately. "For what?" David recounted the morning's events while Maya listened with growing incredulity. As a corporate attorney, she'd dealt with her share of property disputes, but this seemed excessive even by litigation standards. 3 inches, she said when he finished. She filed a police report over 3 inches of grass. "That's what I thought too. But Maya, you should have seen her face when the officers left. She wasn't angry anymore. She was terrified." Maya kicked off her heels and padded to the kitchen window. Karen's house looked different in daylight. All those drawn curtains gave it a haunted quality that made her skin crawl. "People don't usually escalate to police reports over minor property disputes," she said thoughtfully. "Not unless there's something else driving the behavior." "Like what?" "Mental health issues, financial stress, family problems." Maya paused, her legal mind working through possibilities. Or they're hiding something and feeling cornered. David joined her at the window. The officer said she could face charges for filing false reports if she keeps this up. Good. That might scare her into backing down. But even as Maya said it, something felt off. She'd dealt with enough difficult people to recognize the difference between garden-variety neighborhood disputes and something deeper. "David, how well do you actually know Karen?" "Not well." She kept to herself mostly, except for the occasional chat over the fence. He frowned. "Although now that I think about it, she always seemed uncomfortable when other neighbors were around. Like at the HOA meetings, she'd sit in the back and leave early." Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. "What do you know about her background? Work, family, why she moved here?" "Nothing, really. She never talked about work, and I've never seen any family visit. No husband, no kids. She gets a lot of packages, though, Amazon, grocery delivery, pharmacy. Like she doesn't leave the house much. 15 years, and no one knows anything about her personal life." Maya's lawyer instincts were tingling. "That's not just private, David. That's deliberately isolated." Before David could respond, they heard shouting from outside. Not the controlled anger from that morning, but raw, desperate screaming. They rushed to the front window and saw Karen, standing in her driveway, yelling at a man in a dark suit who was taking photographs of her house. The man looked official, federal agent official. "You can't do this." Karen was shrieking. "I have rights. You need a warrant." The man said something, too quiet for David and Maya to hear, but Karen's response carried clearly across the neighborhood. "I don't care what you think you know. I've done nothing wrong." Maya grabbed David's arm. "We need to go outside. Something's happening." They stepped onto their front porch just as 2 more cars pulled up, one unmarked sedan and one van with government plates. Men and women in suits emerged, along with someone carrying what looked like ground-penetrating radar equipment. "Holy shit," Maya whispered. Karen spotted them and her expression shifted from panic to fury. She marched across the street, her earlier composure completely shattered. "This is your fault," she screamed at David. "You and your goddamn fence. Why couldn't you just leave things alone?" Please step back." One of the agents, a woman with short grey hair and steel-rimmed glasses, positioned herself between Karen and the Chens. "We are conducting an official investigation. You need to return to your property." "Investigation into what?" Maya asked, her legal training overriding her shock. The agent looked at her appraisingly. "Are you the homeowners here?" "I'm Maya Chen. This is my husband David. We live next door." Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI. She flashed her credentials. We are executing a search warrant related to a cold case investigation. FBI. Maya felt David tense beside her. What kind of cold case? She asked. Agent Mitchell glanced toward Karen, who was now standing on her lawn wringing her hands while 2 other agents approached her front door. Missing persons. The warrant covers both the house and the surrounding property. Mitchell's eyes moved to David and Maya's backyard, including areas that may extend to the property line. David's stomach dropped. The fence line. Among other areas, yes. Karen let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. 15 years. She shouted at no one in particular. 15 years of peace, and you ruined it with your stupid fence. Maya and David exchanged glances. 15 years, exactly how long Karen had lived in the house. Agent Mitchell, Maya said carefully, does this have anything to do with the property dispute this morning? What property dispute? David quickly explained about Karen's accusations and the police visit, while Mitchell took notes. Her expression grew more interested with each detail. She specifically focused on the fence line. 3 inches of it, David confirmed. She was absolutely certain the fence was encroaching on her property, even though the survey showed it wasn't. And when did you install this fence? Last month. We had the yard surveyed, then brought in Morrison Fencing to install it. Mitchell nodded grimly. How deep did they dig the post holes? Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Why does that matter? Standard fence posts go down about 2 feet, David said, answering both women. Morrison always goes deep for stability. Mitchell was already walking toward their backyard. I'm going to need to examine your fence line, Mr. Chen. We'll try to minimize damage to your property. As they followed her around the house, Maya noticed more agents setting up equipment in Karen's backyard. The ground-penetrating radar operator was already making slow passes across the lawn, watching a small screen that beeped occasionally. Agent Mitchell, Maya said, I'm an attorney. Can you tell us what we are dealing with here? Mitchell paused at the fence line, looking down at the fresh cedar posts. 15 years ago, a woman named Jennifer Walsh disappeared from her apartment in downtown Chicago. She was 28, worked as a bank teller, no known enemies. Just vanished one night after her shift. And you think Karen Whitmore, didn't exist 15 years ago, Mitchell said flatly. The identity was created 6 months before Jennifer Walsh disappeared. Social security number, credit history, employment records, all fabricated with the kind of skill that suggests professional help. David felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. You're saying Karen is, what? A criminal. We're saying Karen Walsh, Jennifer's older sister, disappeared at the same time Jennifer did. Karen had gambling debts, drug problems, and had been asking Jennifer for money. They had a very public fight 3 days before Jennifer vanished. Maya was putting pieces together in her lawyer's mind. You think Karen killed her sister and created a new identity to disappear. We think Karen panicked when Jennifer threatened to cut her off financially. There was evidence of a struggle in Jennifer's apartment, blood on the carpet, but no body was ever found. Mitchell gestured toward the fence posts. Until your husband decided to improve his property line. The implications hit David like a physical blow. The fence posts. Your fence posts were driven exactly along the property line that Karen has been so carefully avoiding for 15 years. If our theory is correct, she buried her sister somewhere along that boundary and has been terrified that construction or landscaping might disturb the grave. As if summoned by their conversation, Karen appeared at the fence line. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, her expensive dress torn at the shoulder. Please, she whispered, looking directly at David. I'll do anything. I'll move away. I'll give you money. Just please don't let them dig up your yard. Agent Mitchell stepped forward. Karen Walsh, you're under arrest for the murder of Jennifer Walsh and obstruction of justice. No. Karen's voice broke. It wasn't supposed to happen. She was going to ruin everything. I just needed the money to disappear, but she said she was done helping me. She said she was going to turn me in to my dealers. You have the right to remain silent. But Karen wasn't listening to the Miranda rights. She was staring at the fence posts with the expression of someone watching. Her entire world collapsed. "I buried her so carefully," she said, almost to herself. 3 feet down, exactly on the property line so no one would ever build there. "I've been maintaining that exact spot for 15 years, making sure the grass looked perfect, that no one would ever have a reason to disturb it." Maya grabbed David's hand as the full horror of the situation sank in. They'd been living next to a murderer. More than that, they'd been unknowingly sleeping 20 feet away from a grave. "The fence posts," David said numbly. "Did we?" Agent Mitchell's expression was grim. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to need you and your wife to find somewhere else to stay tonight. This is now an active crime scene, and we'll be excavating along your property line." As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she turned back one last time. "I was a good neighbor," she called out desperately. 15 years, and I never caused any trouble for Anyo." The Marriott hotel room felt like a sterile prison compared to their cozy suburban home. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, frantically researching everything she could find about Jennifer Walsh's disappearance while David paced by the window, his phone buzzing with calls from reporters who had somehow gotten hold of his number. "Channel 7 wants an exclusive interview," he said, declining another call. "This is insane. Yesterday we were arguing about tomatoes, now we're at the center of a murder investigation." Maya looked up from her screen. "David, look at this." She turned the laptop toward him, showing a Chicago Tribune article from 15 years ago. Jennifer Walsh wasn't just a bank teller. She was an assistant manager at First National, and she'd recently been promoted to handle high-value accounts. Meaning she had access to serious money. "Look at this." Maya clicked to another tab. 3 days before she disappeared, there was an internal audit that flagged unusual activity in several accounts she managed. The bank never went public with it because she vanished before they could complete the investigation. David stopped, pacing. So Karen might not have just killed her sister for refusing to give her money. She might have killed her to cover up embezzlement, or to gain access to the stolen funds. Maya's phone rang. Agent Mitchell. She answered immediately. "Agent Mitchell? Have you found Mrs. Chen? We need you and your husband back at the scene. There's been a development." 30 minutes later, they stood at the edge of their backyard, now transformed into something resembling an archaeological dig. Massive floodlights turned night into harsh day, while FBI technicians worked methodically around 2 deep excavation sites. Crime scene tape blocked off half their property, and the carefully manicured lawn David had been so proud of looked like a war zone. Agent Mitchell approached them, her earlier professional composure replaced by something that looked like grim satisfaction. "We found her," she said simply. "Jennifer Walsh was buried exactly where your fence posts indicated, 3 feet down, wrapped in plastic sheeting, positioned perfectly along the property line." Maya felt sick. 3 feet down. Karen knew exactly where she was. "That's not all." Mitchell gestured toward the second excavation site, about 10 feet away from the first. "We found something else." David's throat tightened. Someone else. Not someone. Something. Mitchell led them closer to the second site, where technicians were carefully brushing dirt away from what appeared to be a metal strongbox. Industrial. Safe. Probably weighs about 200 pounds. Someone went to a lot of trouble to bury it. "The missing bank funds," Maya said immediately. "That would be our guess. Karen didn't just kill her sister and disappear. She stole nearly $500,000 and buried the evidence along with the body." Mitchell paused. "The really interesting part is the positioning. The safe is buried exactly 18 inches from the body, like she was creating some kind of memorial." David stared at the excavation sites, trying to process the psychology of someone who would bury stolen money next to their victim. "She's been living right on top of all this for 15 years. How do you sleep at night knowing, Mr. Chen?" A new voice interrupted them. A young FBI agent approached with urgency. "Agent Mitchell, we have a problem. Karen Walsh is asking to speak with the Chens specifically. She says she'll only discuss plea arrangements if she can talk to them first." Mitchell frowned. "That's highly irregular. She's threatening to recant her confession unless she gets 5 minutes with them. Her lawyer is advising against it, but she's insisting." Maya looked at David. As an attorney, she knew this was unusual to the point of being unethical. But as someone who had been unknowingly living next to this nightmare, she needed to understand. I want to hear what she has to say, Maya said. Absolutely not, Mitchell replied. You're civilians. This could compromise Agent Mitchell. Maya's voice took on the tone she used in difficult negotiations. Karen Walsh lived next to us for 2 years. She brought us cookies. She waved. Good morning. She was planning God knows what if we'd gotten too close to discovering her secret. I think we have a right to hear what she wants to say. 20 minutes later, they sat across from Karen in the FBI's mobile command unit, a converted RV parked, in front of the house that had been her perfect hiding place for 15 years. Karen looked nothing like the polished suburban neighbor they'd known. Her hair was stringy, her makeup long gone, and her hand shook as she clutched a paper cup of coffee. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I know you don't owe me anything. You're right, David said. We don't. Karen flinched but continued. I need you to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen. When I moved here, I just wanted to disappear. Start over. Be normal. By burying your sister in our backyard. Maya's voice was ice cold. The property line, Karen corrected automatically. It was technically the property line. I researched it carefully, areas where no one would ever have reason to dig. David felt a chill of realization. You chose this house specifically because of the property layout. The previous owners had lived here for 30 years without doing any major landscaping. The property line was clearly marked but undeveloped. It seemed safe. Karen's voice broke. I thought I could live with it. I thought I could honor Jennifer's memory by being the person she always wanted me to be. By stealing $500,000. Maya asked. Karen's face crumpled. The money was already missing when Jennifer died. She discovered what I'd done. I'd been skimming from accounts for months to pay off my dealers. She said she was going to turn me in, that she couldn't cover for me anymore. So you killed her. It was an accident. Karen's voice rose desperately. We were fighting. She was threatening to call the police, and I pushed her. She fell and hit her head on the coffee table. There was so much blood. And then you decided to steal her identity and disappear with the money, David said. I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. Jennifer was dead. The money was already missing. If I stayed, I'd go to prison for embezzlement and maybe murder. But if I disappeared as Karen and took on Jennifer's life. She trailed off. Except you couldn't actually become Jennifer, Maya realized. Too many people knew her. So you created a completely new identity. Karen Whitmore, quiet widow from Ohio, moving to start fresh after her husband's death. Karen almost smiled at the memory. I had help, someone who specialized in creating new identities for people in trouble. It cost most of the stolen money, but it worked. David leaned forward. Why are you telling us this? Karen met his eyes for the first time since they'd sat down. Because you were good neighbors. In 15 years, you're the first people who treated me like I was normal. Like I was worthy of basic kindness. The words hung in the air like an accusation. When you moved in and started improving the property, I was terrified. But then you were so nice about my complaints, so willing to compromise. Part of me wanted to confess everything just to stop living the lie. But you didn't, Maya said. No. Instead, I got more paranoid. Every time you worked in the yard, every time you talked about landscaping or home improvements, I imagined you discovering Jennifer. And then when you put up that fence. Karen shuddered. The posts went down exactly where I knew she was buried. I could hear the drilling from inside my house. David felt sick remembering the installation day, how Karen had watched from her window the entire time. I spent that whole week waiting for your contractors to find something. When they didn't, I thought maybe the body had decomposed enough or shifted somehow. But then I started obsessing about the exact property line, measuring and remeasuring. I convinced myself the fence was wrong, that you were encroaching, that somehow the posts had disturbed the grave. So you called the police, Maya said. I thought if I could get you to move the fence, even just a few inches, it would prove nothing was there, that I could finally stop being afraid. Karen laughed bitterly. Instead, I created exactly the kind of attention I'd been avoiding for 15 years. Agent Mitchell entered the RV. Time's up. Karen looked at David and Maya one more time. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know, living next to you, having normal conversations about normal things, pretending to be someone worthy of friendship, those were the only real moments I've had in 15 years. As they prepared to leave, Karen called out one last time. David, Maya, be careful who you trust. The person who helped me create my new identity, who buried Jennifer and the money for me, they're still out there. And they know where you live. Agent Mitchell escorted them out quickly, but not before David caught the fear in Karen's eyes. Not fear of punishment or prison, but fear of someone else. Outside, Maya grabbed David's arm. Did you hear what she said? Someone else was involved. The person who helped her disappear. David looked back at their house, where FBI agents continued working under the bright lights. Maya, what if Karen wasn't the only person with secrets buried in this neighborhood? As if in answer to his question, Agent Mitchell's radio crackled to life. Command, we've got another situation. The ground-penetrating radar is picking up additional anomalies in the yards at 1247 and 1251 Maple Street. David felt the blood drain from his face. 1251 Maple Street was Mrs. Patterson's house. Mrs. Patterson was watering her petunias when the FBI van pulled up to her house at 6 a.m. David and Maya watched from their hotel window across the street as the 73-year-old woman calmly set down her watering can and walked to meet the agents, as if she'd been expecting them. She doesn't look surprised, Maya observed, pressing closer to the window. Agent Mitchell had called them at 5:30 a.m. with an update that had shattered what little sleep they'd managed. The ground-penetrating radar had revealed 3 more burial sites across the neighborhood, one in Mrs. Patterson's rose garden, one beneath the gazebo at 1247 Maple Street, and another in the backyard of a house that had been sold twice in the past decade. It's not just Karen, Mitchell had said grimly. We are looking at what appears to be an organized network spanning 15 years. Now, watching Mrs. Patterson shake hands with federal agents like she was greeting old friends, David felt reality reshaping itself around him. The quiet suburban neighborhood where he'd felt so safe was revealing itself to be something far more sinister. Mr. and Mrs. Chen. A knock at their hotel door interrupted his thoughts. Agent Mitchell entered, followed by a man David didn't recognize, tall, thin, with the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time indoors. This is Agent Tom Reeves from our Financial Crimes Division, Mitchell said. He's been tracking a pattern that connects to your neighbor situation. Reeves opened a tablet and showed them a complex flowchart filled with names, dates, and financial transactions. For the past 8 years, I've been investigating what we call vanishing networks, organized systems that help people disappear completely. New identities, relocated assets, fabricated histories. Like what Karen had, Maya said. Exactly like Karen had. But she wasn't working with some Backley forger. She was part of a sophisticated operation run by someone we've been calling the conductor. Reeves tapped the screen. Someone who creates entire fake communities where people with dangerous secrets can hide in plain sight. David felt his stomach drop. You're saying our whole neighborhood is fake? Not the whole neighborhood, but several key residents, including Mrs. Patterson. Reeves pulled up a new screen showing financial records. Eleanor Patterson died 12 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona. The woman living in her house is actually Margaret Henley, a former accountant who disappeared after being indicted for running a Ponzi scheme that cost retirees over $2 million. Maya sank into a chair. Jesus Christ. How many people in our neighborhood are living under false identities? We are still determining that. But here's what we know. Karen wasn't just randomly buried on your property line. She was placed there by someone who knew the exact layout of every property in the development, someone who understood the legal and practical implications of property boundaries. Mrs. Patterson, David said. Margaret Henley, yes. We believe she's been the conductor's local coordinator for over a decade. Her job was to monitor the relocated people, make sure they maintained their covers, and handle any problems that arose. Agent Mitchell leaned forward. Mr. Chen, when you decided to install that fence, you didn't just threaten to expose Karen's secret. You threatened to expose the entire network. David's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him look. Your fence caused problems for more people than just Karen. Meet me at Millbrook Park in 1 hour if you want to understand what you've stumbled into. Come alone, or people will die. He showed the message to the agents, whose expressions immediately shifted to high alert. We are tracing this now, Mitchell said, already on her radio. Mr. Chen, you're not going anywhere near that park. But what if they're serious about people dying? David asked. Reeves looked up from his tablet. Mr. Chen, we've just identified 4 more residents in your neighborhood who are living under assumed identities. If this network feels threatened enough, they might decide to eliminate witnesses and relocate everyone. Including Karen, Maya realized. She's in custody, but if they think she's talked too much. Agent Mitchell's radio crackled. Agent Mitchell, we have movement at multiple houses on Maple Street. Several residents appear to be packing vehicles. Through the hotel window, David could see unusual activity in the neighborhood. Cars that had been parked in driveways for months were being loaded with suitcases. Curtains that had been closed were now opening as people peered out nervously. They're running, Maya said. Not all of them. Reeves pointed to Mrs. Patterson's house, where the elderly woman was now sitting calmly on her front porch, reading a newspaper as if nothing unusual was happening. She's staying put. That suggests she's confident about something. David's phone buzzed again. 45 minutes, Mr. Chen. Mrs. Patterson has been a good neighbor to you. It would be unfortunate if her cooperation with our investigation became permanent. Mitchell grabbed David's phone. They're threatening her. Or they're threatening to make it look like she's threatening us, Maya said, her legal mind working through the implications. If Mrs. Patterson dies while in FBI custody, it looks like she was silenced. If she dies while apparently threatening David, it looks like self-defense. Either way, the real conductor stays hidden, Reeves concluded. Agent Mitchell made a decision. We are moving the operation. Full tactical teams to secure every identified resident. Reeves, I want complete financial backgrounds on everyone within a 6-block radius. Chen, you're staying here with protective detail. No. David stood up. This started because of my fence. Karen is sitting in custody because I inadvertently exposed her secret. Mrs. Patterson, or whoever she really is, might die because of choices I made unknowingly. I'm not hiding in a hotel room while other people pay the price. Mr. Chen, these people are professional criminals. These people are living in my neighborhood. David's voice rose. Maya and I bought a house there. We planned to start a family there. We have a right to know what kind of community we've been living in. Maya stood beside her husband. Agent Mitchell, as an attorney, I can tell you that David has no legal obligation to stay in protective custody. And as his wife, I can tell you that he's not going to sit still while this unfolds around him. Mitchell looked between them, clearly frustrated. The meet is obviously a trap. Of course it is, David agreed. But maybe that's what we need. If I go to the park, they'll make their move. You'll have agents watching, and you can follow them back to whoever is really running this operation. Using you as bait. Using me as a concerned homeowner who wants his neighborhood back. Agent Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, weighing options. Finally, she nodded grimly. Fine. But you go wired, with full tactical support. And if I give the signal to abort, you run like hell. 30 minutes later, David sat in his car in the parking lot of Millbrook Park, a small recording device taped to his chest and an earpiece hidden beneath his hair. The park was eerily quiet for a Saturday morning. No children on the playground, no joggers on the paths. Eyes on 3 vehicles. Mitchell's voice crackled in his ear. Black sedan at the north entrance. White van by the tennis courts, grey. Pickup truck behind the maintenance building. We have you covered. As David walked toward the designated meeting spot, a bench near the duck pond, he tried to process everything he'd learned in the past 24 hours. His simple desire for backyard privacy had unraveled a criminal network that had been operating under his nose for over a decade. The bench was occupied. Mrs. Patterson sat there feeding breadcrumbs to the ducks, looking exactly like the harmless elderly neighbor he'd known for 2 years. Except now he knew she was actually Margaret Henley, a financial criminal living under a dead woman's identity. Hello, David, she said without looking up. Thank you for coming. David sat down beside her, trying to keep his voice steady. I know who you really are, Margaret. She smiled sadly. I suppose the game is up, isn't it? 15 years of careful planning, undone by offense. Why did you help Karen bury her sister? Because I understood what it was like to make one terrible mistake and have it destroy everything. Mrs. Patterson, Margaret, finally looked at him. I never meant to hurt anyone with my investment scheme. I genuinely believed I could make the returns work. But when it all collapsed, you ran. I ran. And I found people who could help me disappear completely. Start over. Be someone better. She scattered more breadcrumbs. The conductor doesn't just provide new identities, David. They provide second chances, community, purpose. By enabling criminals. By helping people who made mistakes find redemption. Margaret's voice hardened slightly. Karen spent 15 years being a model neighbor. She volunteered at the animal shelter, donated to charity, lived quietly and hurt no one. Wasn't that better than her rotting in prison? David felt Agent Mitchell's voice in his ear. Keep her talking. We are tracking 2 more vehicles approaching the park. What about Jennifer Walsh? What about the people you stole money from? Margaret was quiet for a moment. There are no perfect solutions, David. Only trade-offs. The question is whether you're willing to accept the complexity of what you've discovered, or whether you're going to insist on destroying lives for the sake of abstract justice. This isn't abstract. These are real crimes with real victims. And what? David's hand shook as he stared at his phone, waiting for contact from Maya's kidnappers. Agent Mitchell was coordinating a manhunt from the mobile command unit, but every passing minute felt like a countdown to disaster. We lost the van at the interstate interchange, Mitchell reported grimly. They knew exactly where our surveillance units were positioned. Inside information, Agent Reeves added. Someone in law enforcement is feeding them intelligence. David felt his world spinning further out of control. How is that possible? The same way Margaret Henley has been operating undetected for 15 years, Mitchell said. This network has resources and connections we are only beginning to understand. David's phone buzzed. Video message. Maya sat tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, her face streaked with tears but her expression defiant. Behind her stood a figure in shadows, tall, wearing dark clothing, face obscured. Mr. Chen, the figure spoke in an electronically distorted voice. Your wife is unharmed, as promised. She will remain so if you convince the FBI to close their investigation immediately. David, don't you dare. Maya's voice was cut off as someone moved off camera. You have 30 minutes to clear all agents from Maple Street and issue a public statement that the investigation was based on mistaken evidence. In exchange, your wife will be returned safely, and the network will relocate without further incident. The video ended. We can't negotiate with kidnappers, Mitchell said immediately. That's my wife. David exploded. I don't care about your investigation. Mr. Chen, if we let them escape, they'll continue operating somewhere else. More people will die, more crimes will go unpunished. I don't care about other people right now. David's voice cracked. I care about Maya. Agent Reeves looked up from his tablet. David, there might be another way. Both David and Mitchell turned to him. I've been analyzing the financial records we recovered from Karen's safe. The network's money flows through a specific routing system, one that requires constant digital maintenance. Reeves pulled up a complex diagram. If we can identify the central server location, we can potentially track every member of the network simultaneously. How does that help Maya? David asked. Because the ransom demands are coming from the same digital infrastructure. If we can trace the communication back to its source. Reeves typed rapidly. There. The video signal originated from a warehouse complex about 12 miles from here. Mitchell was already mobilizing tactical teams, but David had a different idea. Agent Mitchell, what if I go to them? Absolutely not. No, listen. I go to the warehouse, wired like before, but this time I offer them something they want more than Maya's silence. Which is? David pulled out his phone and showed them Karen's contact information, which he'd saved from their morning confrontation 2 days ago. Karen, I offer to help her escape. Mitchell stared at him. You want to aid and abet a convicted murderer. I want to get close enough to their operation to give you the intelligence you need to shut them down permanently. David's mind was racing. Think about it. They took Maya because they need leverage over me. But what they really need is Karen. Back under their control. She knows too much about the network to leave in custody. That's incredibly dangerous, David. So is letting my wife die while we stand here debating. 20 minutes later, David sat in an FBI surveillance van outside the warehouse complex, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the earpiece, he could hear Mitchell coordinating with tactical units positioned around the perimeter. Remember. Mitchell's voice was steady but tense. Your job is to get eyes on Maya and identify as many network members as possible. Do not attempt any heroics. David walked toward the main warehouse building, a prepaid phone in his hand containing a fabricated text thread with Karen about an escape plan. If the network believed he was helping Karen break out of custody, they might let him close enough to Maya to attempt a rescue. The warehouse door opened before he could knock. Margaret Henley stood there, no longer playing the role of harmless, elderly neighbor. Her posture was straighter, her expression sharp and calculating. Behind her, David could see at least 6 other people, including faces he recognized from his neighborhood. David, she said, I was hoping you'd make the intelligent choice. Where's my wife? Safe. First, let me see the evidence of your cooperation. David handed her the phone, showing the fake text conversation with Karen. Margaret scrolled through it, her expression unreadable. Very convincing, she said finally. But we both know this is fabricated. David's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? David, I've been running identity operations for 20 years. Do you really think I wouldn't spot a honey trap when I see one? Margaret smiled coldly. The question is whether you're here as bait for the FBI, or whether you genuinely believe you can outsmart us. Before David could respond, he heard Maya's voice from deeper in the warehouse. David, it's a trap. They know about the... Her voice was muffled, but David was already moving past Margaret into the warehouse. What he saw stopped him cold. Maya was tied to a chair, as in the video, but she wasn't alone. Karen Walsh sat in a second chair beside her, very much not in FBI custody. Surprise, Karen said weakly. Turns out jailbreaks are easier when half the guards work for the network. David spun toward Margaret. You broke her out. We retrieved our asset, yes. Karen's knowledge of our Chicago operations makes her too valuable to leave in government. Hands. Margaret gestured toward the other figures in the warehouse. Just as your neighbor's expertise in various fields makes them valuable to our continued operations. David recognized Tom from 1247 Maple Street, the quiet man who Margaret had claimed was hiding from an abusive ex-wife. Beside him stood Dr. Patricia Wong from 1253, who Maya had always praised as the neighborhood's friendliest resident. How many of you are there? David asked. In this neighborhood, 8 active residents, plus 4 support personnel. Margaret walked closer. Nationally, we operate in 47 communities across 23 states. Over 300 people living peaceful, productive lives under our protection. People who committed serious crimes. People who made mistakes and deserve second chances. Dr. Wong stepped forward. David, I was a surgeon who accidentally caused a patient's death during an experimental procedure. The malpractice suit would have destroyed not just my career, but my family's entire future. The network gave me a chance to keep helping people. By living a lie. By living a life where I could do good instead of rotting in prison. Tom joined the conversation. David, every person here has spent years contributing positively to the community. We volunteer, we pay taxes, we help our neighbors. Isn't that better than whatever punishment the legal system would have imposed? David felt the moral complexity of the situation weighing on him. These weren't career criminals, they were people who had made terrible mistakes and been given a chance at redemption. But Maya was still tied to a chair, and Karen was still a murderer. Margaret, he said, I understand what you're trying to accomplish. But my wife is innocent in all this. Let her go, and we can discuss terms. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Margaret's expression softened with what looked like genuine regret. David, your fence didn't just threaten to expose one grave. It triggered a comprehensive federal investigation that's already identified our operations in 6 other states. The network can't survive that level of scrutiny. So what are you saying? I'm saying that everyone who knows about the network has to make a choice. Join us, or... She didn't finish the sentence, but David understood. You're going to kill us. We are going to offer you a chance to disappear. New identities, new lives, somewhere far from here. You and Maya can start over, and the network continues helping people who need second chances. David looked at Maya, who was shaking her head frantically. And if we refuse? Margaret's kindly facade finally cracked. Completely. Then you become a liability that must be eliminated. David heard Agent Mitchell's voice crackling in his hidden earpiece. Teams in position. We need your location in the building. He had to buy time and get more intelligence about the network structure. Margaret, if we agree to this, to joining your network, how does it work? Where would we go? We have a community in Montana. Former white-collar criminals, mostly, building a sustainable agricultural operation. You'd have meaningful work, a comfortable life, and the satisfaction of helping others start over. And the FBI investigation will die with the current witnesses. Margaret's voice turned cold again. David, I need an answer. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous this becomes for everyone. David made his choice. Maya, he called out, remember our first date? The restaurant where you ordered the special. Maya's eyes widened in understanding. On their first date, Maya had ordered the special, a code they developed that meant call the police. She nodded almost imperceptibly. I remember, she said. Best meal I ever had. David, Margaret said impatiently, what is your decision? My decision, David said clearly, is that Millbrook Cafe serves the best pancakes in 3 counties. The phrase meant nothing to Margaret, but it was the code word Agent Mitchell was waiting for. Suddenly, the warehouse exploded into chaos. Flashbang grenades shattered the win.